When William C. Dietz's novel about Shaak Ti, Escape from Dagu, was cancelled, Sean Stewart was contacted about writing a Yoda-centric novel in its place. The only problem? He was only given 4 months to work on the story from start to finish. I'm always sad when I hear about these canceled Legends novels because for the most part, we don't get to see them. It's not like Heart of the Jedi and they get released on the internet years later. They're just gone. But I am really, really glad that we got Yoda Dark Rendezvous because it is highly acclaimed as one of the Clone Wars stories, enough so that it is going to be one of the essential Legends collection re-releases coming out in 2023. I have read and reread Yoda Dark Rendezvous multiple times, enough so that I chose to seek out the hardcover science fiction book club edition on eBay because I wanted something that would last longer than the original mass market paperback. But I haven't actually reread it in almost 10 years, so I was interested in revisiting the story and seeing if it held up as well for me as it did during those initial reads. So, a brief summary. Almost 3 years into the Clone Wars, a Jedi returns to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant with startling news. Count Dooku wants to sue for peace, and he will only speak to Jedi Master Yoda. Yoda and Mace Windu are convinced that this is a trap, but if it's not, Yoda will take any risks necessary to try to bring this fallen Jedi back to the light. I'm honestly a little surprised that Lucasfilm and Del Rey decided to have a Yoda novel at all, because so much about Yoda, even to this day, is wreathed in mystery. We don't know his species, we don't know his homeworld, we know that he lived to be 900 plus years old, but a lot of his backstory is just unknown because George Lucas didn't choose to flesh it out. And in writing Yoda Dark Rendezvous, obviously Stewart can't touch on any of those things, but what he can touch on is Yoda's deep connection to the Jedi Order, and specifically to the young Jedi. Yoda loves teaching children, he loves interacting with them, and so that's what we get to see here. Not just Yoda's urge to bring Dooku back to the light, but also how Yoda interacts with Padawans like Scout and Whie. The Yoda of Dark Rendezvous is also much more similar to the Yoda of Empire Strikes Back than the Yoda we see in the prequel films. And that was intentional on Stewart's part. He really loved Yoda as this wise little mischievous gremlin, and that was the aspects of his character that he wanted to bring to the forefront here. And those are also like my favorite parts of Yoda's character, that when you initially meet him in Empire Strikes Back, he's playing the fool, but he's much wiser than he initially appears. It works pretty well for me, except there's a few bits in the story where Stewart just pushes it a little too far. I'm thinking specifically of the scene in the Jedi dining hall in the midst of the Jedi Padawan tournament, where he has a disgusting bowl of broth and a droid tries to take it from him and bring him actual food, and Yoda's beating him with his stick. It was such an overt callback to Empire Strikes Back that I just honestly didn't think it was necessary. But the rest of it, Yoda hiding in an astromech droid, Yoda joking with the Padawans and bringing them out of their grief, and just the insights that Yoda has feel so true to his character, and I really enjoyed and appreciated Stewart's portrayal of him. I especially love Yoda's confrontation with Dooku at the end, that most of it is not lightsaber waving, but words, dialogue, and that despite Dooku's mental block that this is a trap and he's not going to listen to anything Yoda says and he's not going to give in to what Yoda says, that if it weren't for the appearance of Obi-Wan and Anakin jolting Dooku out of this, making him remember what his intentions are, that Yoda, I think, honestly could have reached him and could have brought him back. the idea of Yoda falling to the dark side being the absolute worst thing that can happen is true. Yoda is so strong and so old and so wise that just the concept of a dark Yoda is terrifying. And I honestly believe that at this point in time especially, Yoda would try his hardest to bring Dooku back, not just because of what it means for the war, but because I think that every one of the Lost Jedi hurts Yoda personally, and especially Dooku, because they have this backstory that Yoda taught him. Yoda was an integral part of his upbringing, and if anyone could reach Dooku now, it's Yoda. I also really like how Stewart fleshes out Dooku here. Dooku has been a bit of an enigma since Attack of the Clones, that he's a fallen Jedi, he's allied himself with Sidious, he's fighting against the Republic, he seems to believe that the Republic is broken, and just a lot of his backstory is nebulous. It's not fleshed out in great detail here, but I like the glimpse that we saw of him, that like Anakin, Dooku was a young man with great power, great potential, everything came easily to him. And he wanted to be recognized for that the scenes of the game that Yoda would play with the Padawans and the younglings, that the fact that he couldn't beat Yoda gnaws at him because Dooku wants to be the best at everything he does. But at the same time, he has blind spots that even Asajj Ventress can see. She points out to him that his master, Sidious, is using him, that once Sidious's use for him is done, that Sidious will discard him. And that's not something that Dooku wants to accept at this point in time. Dooku is old, Dooku is wise, but he's not wise like Yoda, and in a way he's not able to see the big picture in the same way that Yoda is. He sees defeating Yoda, killing Yoda, as a milestone for him, like the next thing he needs to conquer. It doesn't seem to be part of Sidious's plans, though, as we can see by the fact that Palpatine asks the Jedi to dispatch Obi-Wan and Anakin to save Yoda. And Anakin and Obi-Wan are here briefly. They come in and out of the story. I'll get to this a bit in the issues section, but it did remind me a bit of how in some of the stories it seems like there's criteria the authors need to reach, and including key characters is one of them. So in this case, despite how well it may work for the story, and I think in some parts it works, in some parts it doesn't work, Anakin and Obi-Wan are here in and out. And of course, this would be a Yoda story without some young Jedi for him to teach along the way. So we have the Padawans Whie Malreaux and Scout, and then their masters, Maruk and Max Leem. Maruk is the messenger that Dooku and Ventress send back to Coruscant to pass along Dooku's message that he wants to sue for peace and talk to Yoda. And Maruk is a harsh person. He doesn't want to take Scout as a Padawan, but Yoda essentially maneuvers him into doing so. He's upset that Dooku let him go, essentially, because he didn't fight his way out. He didn't escape. He was wounded by Ventress, and then Dooku just let him go, and that really nags at him throughout the story. Later on, when he's dueling Ventress, he has a moment of realization where he just realizes she's better than him. No matter what he does, he can't win. And Whie's master, Max Leem, I love that she's a Gran. I just love getting to see aliens used throughout the story. And she's kind and she's gentle. But as with Maruk, that doesn't save her in the end. I guessed that they weren't going to make it, not just from my previous knowledge, but because there is a vision that Whie has towards the beginning of him and Scout being confronted by Ventress, and like the Jedi Masters aren't there at all. But I'm still was pleasantly surprised by the fact that even though we don't know them super well, when they die, it still hurts you to read about it. Like, they're not hugely known characters. We've learned a little bit about them, and the little bit that we learned is enough that when they die, it's still sad to read about. But I think that where Stewart puts most of the characterization is into those two Padawans, into Whie and Scout. Whie has very interesting Force abilities, not something that we've really seen before, but he essentially has this Force gift of having true dreams. When Whie sleeps, sometimes he has the usual nightmares. He's falling, he's failing, but sometimes his dreams are something that will happen to him later. And it's not until that happens that he realizes, wait, I dreamed this. I knew this was coming. It's almost like he's a helpless passenger in his older self's head, just following along as events unfold. The first true dream he has in the story is Ventress threatening him and Scout. And then later he has a dream where he is cut down by a Jedi. And this leads him to worry that he's going to fall to the dark side and a Jedi is going to have to dispatch him. Whie initially is trying to be the good Jedi, the proper Jedi. He's always calm, he's always patient, he's always serene. Yoda, at least, is able to look at him and recognize that this is an act, that this is something that Whie is trying to be, but that's not his true personality. And as the story unfolds, Whie finds that harder to attain. That after that dream about Scout, then he starts to notice Scout, and he's a young teenage boy, so that he's almost romantically interested in Scout, and he's uncomfortable about that because he's a Jedi Padawan. That's not what they're supposed to do. He learns about his past from a droid that's employed by his family, that his family was wealthy aristocrats on Vjun, that his father and some other people attempted to experiment on the local population to up their Force ability, and they drove everyone to madness, and that his mother gave him to the Jedi Order. So then he's also very interested about going to Vjun because it's his ancestral home. And so once they reach Vjun, Whie feels strong, Whie feels he can accomplish anything, but Whie's still struggling with that premonition that he's going to die at the hands of a Jedi, and it taints everything he does for the end of the story. I really liked Whie's Force ability. I think it works well for Whie more so than it would for a more prominent character because Whie's a Padawan. Whie's not doing anything critical to the outcome of the war or the galaxy. And in Whie's case, he never dreams past a certain age, which does that mean that he will die or not? I don't know. I mean, I do know. I know that Order 66 is looming on the horizon, and that Whie's from a deleted scene where he got cut down by Darth Vader, but within the story there's so much ambiguity there. And especially knowing that this came out before Revenge of the Sith, before we knew any of that, it lends a very interesting sense of unease to his character in these revelations. But I think my favorite of the Padawans is Scout, or Talizabeth, and Wang Dun Esther Hazy, which is a very long name for a little girl. So fortunately, she has the nickname of Scout. Scout's character could be summed up in a phrase that Mace Windu says about her, which is, "The Force is weak in this one." And honestly, these are some of my favorite characters who are not inherently strong in the Force, and so have to train themselves to make up for it. So she makes up for it by being really observant and training super, super hard. Leading into the Padawan tournament, she has either openly or not studied all of her opponents, figured out where their weak points are, and she also trains her hardest at everything she can because she's so worried she's going to be sent to the agricultural corps and she's not going to be able to become a Jedi. She was a Padawan, but her master died at the Battle of Geonosis, and since then, no one else will take her as a Padawan, and she views the tournament as her last chance. So she plays dirty. She doesn't duel like the others. She's willing to use their good manners against them. She realizes the constraints of the fight and grabs a training lightsaber with her bare hand so that she's, through her trickery, able to win the tournament and become the Padawan of Whie Malreaux. She's so sure that she's always going to fail that when she succeeds, she's expecting the worst and surprised by it. I think that Stewart likes Scout a lot, and that's really reflected in her character because she's so personable and fun to read about. You're really rooting for her because you see how hard she tries, that she knows her limits and she's trying to push back past them to the best of her abilities. And lurking in the background for all of this is Asajj Ventress, who's pushing Dooku to make her his apprentice, but Dooku doesn't want to, and Ventress is really chafing at the constraints of this arrangement. She's killed 16, 17 Jedi, she boasts about it, but I feel that there is a sense of inadequacy in Asajj that she is constantly trying to work through. And it makes her an interesting character. I think of all the Clone Wars stories thus far, I find Asajj Ventress most interesting in Yoda Dark Rendezvous than any of the others, although really the only story she appeared in to any great detail was the Cestus Deception. So I hugely enjoyed rereading Yoda Dark Rendezvous, but as usual, I did pick up on some issues this time. The first is that, like in my remembrances of Heir to the Empire, where I thought that Luke and Mara on Merkur was like a huge chunk of the story when it wasn't, I thought that they were on Vjun much longer than they actually were. Yoda and Whie and Scout don't arrive on Vjun until chapter 10 out of 12, which was surprising to me. Vjun is a really weird world in that it's supposedly strong in the dark side. Whether that's true or not, it is very strong in the Force, and it has this very dark history, and the world is creepy and dark and malicious. There's acid rain and strange creatures. It reminded me a lot of Barbara Hambly's worlds in Children of the Jedi and Planet of Twilight, that there is so much atmosphere here. Beyond anything else, I remembered the world of Vjun more so than the plot of this story. And I did feel like, perhaps because I was so interested in Vjun, that I wished we could have spent more time there. For instance, I would have loved to have spent more time with Yoda and Dooku talking. I found their confrontation so intriguing, and I was so wrapped up in it, and then I felt like it got cut short by Dooku realizing that Anakin was there and throwing a hissy fit and just taking off. A lot of time is spent leading up to them getting to Vjun, especially there is a lengthy sequence where Yoda and Scout and Whie and Max Leem and Whie Malreaux have to go through TSA security to get on their transport. And this felt very 2004 to me, that Whie Malreaux is like talking back to the guy and he has to get a lengthy pat down and they have to go through the scanner and all this stuff. And that was one bit that just felt too Earth analog to me. And I would have happily gotten rid of some of that so I could have had more of Yoda and Dooku talking, because that part was so good. Similarly, I was really surprised that Whie never interacted with his mother, Whirry, at all. She has gone mad. She's essentially serving as the housekeeper of Chateau Maruk while Dooku lives there. And she claims to be able to see the future through spills on the floor and broken cups and things like that. And she's constantly talking about how the baby's coming back, the baby's coming back. And when the droid Fidelis leads them into Chateau Maruk, that was because Whirry told him to do so. But then Dooku lashes out at her, sends her flying through the window, Yoda's able to save her, and that's it. When we see her again, Yoda and Whie and Scout and Obi-Wan and Anakin have left, and she's just like ready to die. And especially with we learning about his past, I just would have liked one scene where he at least got to see his mother and interact with her, but that just never happened at all. And the Obi-Wan and Anakin presence here did feel like dictated from Del Rey, that they needed to appear in this story because this is a Star Wars Clone Wars story. But I really liked that the thing that broke Dooku's almost concentration on what Yoda had to say and Dooku's reception to what Yoda had to say was the presence of Anakin. Because even though Dooku has these blind spots about his relationship with Sidious, he can still recognize that, like, Sidious's interest in Anakin bodes badly for Dooku. And just too that Anakin is the current, like, wonder child of the Jedi Order makes him mad. So even though I don't think they were necessary in the story, I think that Anakin's presence on Vjun is what makes Dooku remember, this is my trap to get Yoda. Like, that was perfect. That was perfect, even if I do question his presence in the rest of the story. And then there are a fair number of viewpoints in this story we switch back and forth through. We have at least 3 scenes in the beginning, the middle, and the end, which are Padme. They sort of bookend the story. And I was like, why is she here? This is a short story. I think that there were things that could have been further fleshed out and I would have enjoyed it even more. But you know, Padme's viewpoint here is completely unnecessary. So, in short, I really love Yoda Dark Rendezvous. Even with the issues that I found in this reread, I still love it so much. I think that Stewart's portrayal of Yoda is much more in keeping with Empire Strikes Back Yoda, and that's my favorite Yoda, so I just love reading him. And I really like what Stewart does with Dooku here, that this is really the most in-depth look we've got into him, at his character, since Attack of the Clones, and he's fascinating to read about. And I love the Padawans, especially Scout. She's just so easy to root for. I'm really excited for the Essential Legends collection re-release, especially because I assume that means a new unabridged audiobook from Marc Thompson, which is always a treat. Don't talk trash about Yoda Dark Rendezvous to me, it's my favorite. So next time, I'm going to be reading James Luceno's direct prequel to Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, Labyrinth of Evil.